So we'll touch upon just to start off the basics, like what is really community, what is community participation, and that is what participatory planning is all about, and really how you can go about engaging with the community. So to first, the whole first step is to understand what is community, and with that, you should really understand what does that scale even mean, and what role does ethnography play for understanding neighborhoods. So community is a pretty familiar term to all of us. You know, it's something that is like it's understood to be a social unit. It is what makes a place alive, and and the people within the place are what the community is all about, and they share, you know, similar characteristics, like they follow similar norms or they have similar understanding of situations, and that's what makes them act as one entity. More than that, community is also a sense of a person's personal identity. It kind of helps them shape their own identities and understand the identity of their own culture. And in itself, by achieving all of this, they are able to also have a better sense of well-being, and being a part of that community make sure that all that is taken care of. It's also important to understand that urban developments, like any kind of buildings that are built in the community, so that is, say, within a neighborhood, are actually found to be very high impact events. So when there is a change in the neighborhood, like there is a brand new structure that is being built, all sorts of changes start happening. The communities actually face quite a lot of changes in their lives, and it has been studied to be even similar to events such as, you know, the birth of children, or the same as the death of loved ones. So sometimes you will even see that when a building is removed from a place, that there is a real sense of personal loss, or if there is something new that comes and can bring the community together, it's like there's a certain strengthening of the bond of the community. So it's very important for us to understand the impact of these sorts of urban developments. So just to understand scale, so say if you were to see that this, like I'm sure you're all familiar with the map of Oman and Muscat, and these are just some of the towns that are identified by the census in 2010. And if you zoom into that, that is what the entire governor of Muscat is like. And if you were to zoom in closer, that is when you start seeing these buildings as you know, as separate entities. And it's only at this level of, say, when the area of becomes around 1 square kilometer, that's when a neighborhood is sort of felt to be your own. So people are able to actually connect with a place, not at the larger levels, but actually within this neighborhood scale. So when you are going to come up with any kind of developments at the various levels, you may impact, say, multiple neighborhoods. And so you may, so the response may not be that, you know, if you are giving a strategy or a planning development idea at this scale, that it doesn't that it only affects one type of community. It actually would be affecting multiple communities, because it is at this level that it feels like one neighborhood. So, why is ethnography important to understand, and what is an ethnographic perspective of place? So, ethnography is basically just a terminology to which states that it's the study of people and society. So, it's basically to understand the underlying behaviors, motives, and why people do the things that they do. And it's kind of like a study. It's actually based on sociology, but it's very important in our case because it helps us understand, like if we say urban ethnography, we're actually taking the study of people and societies into the urban realm. So urban ethnography is to understand a place, like a site or a context, or all these traditional bits of information, but then it means to understand the people who actually belong to it and can affect how it works. And it also helps us recognize that the community is the expert of its own place. And the success of any kind of development is embedded in their motivations. So every community is actually what gives a master plan or proposal its level of success. So what does ethnography do? So uh, sorry about the animation mix up, but basically it identifies or it answers certain questions. So ethnography answers who is the community. So it actually helps us decode the characteristics of the community. It understands who are the different types of people involved, young, old, what all backgrounds are there. So if you were to go into one neighborhood, you would actually be able to understand who are the different people in that community, what are their abilities, what are their histories. It helps us to answer the question of what drives or inspires or motivates the people. So it actually helps us to understand their underlying motives. Like, say, if they say, we like this or we prefer that, it helps you understand why they do that, and you'll come across different factors. Like, it may not just be their own personal age or identity, but it might be certain experiences in that neighborhood or within their culture that makes their preferences a particular way. And it also answers the questions like how and why do communities change. So there's a lot of requirement in ethnography, where, like, if you go in with that ethnographic approach, saying that I want to understand these motivations and understand all the different people involved, it actually relies a lot on trust building, which means that it's kind of more long term. It's not within your project period only. It is something that once you go in and start talking to people, that you have to sort of build up over time and learn more and more about them, so you can actually understand all the routines and rituals that would shape all of their experiences of the place. So it's pretty important to understand here that every place matures over time. So if you have a new urban development, it doesn't just get built and start performing as a successful place with all the right design features, etc. It is the people that actually need to start building up their narratives, start to experience events, and it can take many years, many generations, many stories, and many lives to actually make that place feel like a complete place. This is very important to understand, because a lot of the times planners and developers and experts would say this is a perfect place and it should behave perfectly. But actually, it is very hard to get that social sort of fabric working within it. And we all know now by now that the community is the soul of a place. So until the community is successfully performing, the place cannot perform well. So it's also good to then recognize that places that already have established strong communities, a strong sense of well-being and strong sense of belonging, have something more to offer, and that they're not just to be forgotten and kept aside, because they have that as one big advantage. So what is community participation? How can it be effectively used? And how can we enable robust community participation in Oman? So these are, there were some various photos that I also put in about community participation, that includes photos from Gala. So Oman Urban, we went into Gala with just volunteers and wanted to go in with an ethnographic approach, saying, let's talk to the people to understand them first, not about needs and issues and planning principles, and or even some sort of ideas of what we should be doing there. But we just want to go in and understand how they behave and what is important to them. And we got to say, on the left is a picture of from the field itself, where we conducted like a group discussion. So this is called a focus group discussion, or an FGD. And for ethnography to be successful, like, if you want to really understand people, you have to sort of know where what how your role is in the whole scenario. So the volunteers of Oman Urban were sort of conducting the FGD, or the focus group discussion, and we had the right tools. Say we had maps, we had some questions for ourselves to ask everyone, and we had some certain structure to this whole group discussion, because the more people there are, the more planning needs to happen, the more structured it needs to be, so that people can feel free enough to express themselves, but also be able to compartmentalize their ideas and follow some sort of a structure. In this way, we were able to expose so many stories and so many values of the different parts of Gala. Like for instance, this is a small village. It's the oldest, like the older village in Gala, not the industrial area that we live in. It's really a small village, and it shows how they also help to organize such. So this is an interesting idea of the community participation ladder. So there are different levels of community participation, and it's all about how effective can you really be. So this is actually a very popular diagram called the Sherryon scheme ladder of citizenship participation, and it was published in 1969 in the American Planning Association Journal. It basically explains that each step from the bottom of this ladder to the top is like a level or effectiveness of community participation. So this sort of aspect is like, say, least participative, and then the top of the ladder is the highest level of participation with the community. So we'll just quickly understand what this means, because we need to be able to reflect within ourselves, is the approach that we're using really truly effective community participation or not. So say in terms of non-participation, things like, in the name of community participation, people are sort of placed on sort of advisory committees or some sort of boards and made to feel like they, in an important position, but actually they're just being educated by the so-called experts to sort of tell them how they should support them. So that is a kind of non-participation. It's not really participation. Then another type is when say the government or some sort of more powerful stakeholder tries to convince the people that they are the problem and this is how they can solve it. So the best knowledge is coming from the government and the best knowledge is coming from the experts. That is not really participation again, because there is no feedback and there is absolutely no representation from the community either. Then the next level is, say, tokenism, saying that, okay, well, there is some level of involvement from the community where, say, if you inform the people of what you're doing, that is a very important step. And that's very good because you're acknowledging that people need to know what's happening and what's going to happen in their places. But it's still just one way information. You're telling them what's going to happen and that's it. They don't have any mechanism for feedback. They don't have any mechanism to be involved. Then there is the idea of consultation, saying, okay, we invite people and we try to do something to learn about what they want or what they can get out of this, and then send them back and we do our work. That's again considered not very participatory. It's more like a token sort of representation of the community. It's like saying, okay, we will ask them to fill out a bunch of questionnaires. They will take some brochures, they'll attend some meetings, and that's all that we will see if we need to use it or not. That again will be not exactly considered community participation. Then sorry. Then there's placation, meaning that you're trying to sort of just keep the peace and say, okay, it's okay, whatever you say is fine. You just say one or two people from the community, or say there's so they get a say in the matter, but then it's not doesn't have any power. Then there is the idea of the highest levels of participation. So without getting too detailed about it, it's more like saying at the higher levels of participation, there is some amount of power that is given to the community itself. That there is some level of infrastructure provided, accountability by the government and by the experts, that the community members have an authority to ask a question and raise an issue and make sure that it is resolved, and that they have the authority to sort of decide on certain matters, and that the government doesn't necessarily get to decide on everything. Now that's a different level, and they can even say secure fund for it. They can even be, representing certain decisions on policies that can be taken, that must be amended, etc., etc. So that's considered the highest level. This is just good to know because there are all these types of questions that you may come across that, well, we're doing this and this is not working, or we say something. Because I think I've come across a lot of the times when I've met a lot of government stakeholders who would tell me, well, we have this amazing plan. It works exactly as it should. It will resolve everything that needs to be resolved in the community. But when we give it to them, they just say, no, they don't want to deal with it and they just reject it. So we need to advertise better to them. So the idea is not about advertising or convincing, but it is about cooperating and collaborating, and really giving that power of the decision. And if you feel that there is not enough skill on one side, it is the responsibility of the government to provide the know-how and the support and the infrastructure for certain things to happen. So this is not really an established infrastructure of civic and participation, like community participation, that's already there, and there are not enough policies and guidelines in place. There are not enough organizations yet that are set up, And so for that reason, I'm just putting up like a quick recommendation on how this can happen. So there are some levels which must be reached for community participation truly work in its entire sense. So at the very bottom baseline, you need to have to be able to like the government needs to be able to support research and build up these ethnographic libraries about different communities, because it not only acknowledges that there are different identities and different neighborhoods with different communities, and that each of them act in a different way. They have different evolution, they have different events, have changed their minds or have affected their lives. So with building up a library over time, you can actually develop better community insights, and the government can actually use this information from the ground to be able to get better vision and action plans along with the local communities without missing that big without that big communication gap. The next would be to create resourceful communities. You have to be able to provide financial and practical support and administrative support to help local communities set up some sort of a framework and how they can build their own skills when it comes to civic engagement. And the government can do a lot in terms of administering and helping them get their feet off the ground. And finally, develop infrastructure to build and sustain community organizations. So you have to be able to build some sort of trust, build a policy framework, a framework of accountability, monitoring, and all this infrastructure would help sustain all of these local community organizations. So all that has to be robustly prepared. And once that becomes the norm across various regions, then proposals and future plans can become more robust, can actually be truly responsive and truly effective. I'll take questions maybe at the end because I just want to complete it. But this next, yeah, section, oops, sorry. So the next section talks about how you can engage with the community, like what are Olivera Petrovic, who has conducted such participating workshops in her own country, Serbia, and also within Oman, and how and she's also helped us sort of get through what tools you can use. So when it comes to local initiatives, so say Oman Think Urban has a think tank, which is just volunteer groups who are trying to build up that bottom line ethnographic community libraries. So trying to go into different communities, identify that they are unique, identify what makes them unique, who are the different people and actors and characters of the place, and how these characteristics are affected by new interventions, and how is the best way to build trust with them, etc., etc. So by going on the field and doing these long-term studies in different communities, we can even identify that there are already community groups. Like we know that in the old village of Gala, there's already very active, highly active volunteer groups made out of the sheikh, then the various families. There are men groups, women groups. They organize cleanups. They organize even patrolling the ain and the public spaces to make sure that there's no crime. They actually do a lot of self-regulation. They improve their own conditions. So there's some level of self-reliance, and there's also some level of organization they can represent themselves to the government. But there is very little infrastructure right now present for them to be able to know what channels to follow. So with the Mantik Urban, if we can actually identify that this is the character of this place, these are the different active groups, and we can work with the government to create infrastructure like this, we can actually replicate small across the various neighborhoods in Oman. And this can actually have a global impact. This is not something that is already practice-based. Effective participatory planning and effective community participation in central government is not really practiced anywhere in the Middle Eastern region. So if at the state that Oman is in with the ONSS and with the programs that are connected to the ONSS, there is actually a unique situation that we can put these systems to be developed right at the beginning as these larger strategies are starting to be formulated. So there's a big potential, and if we can tap that potential, it would be very easy to say that we'd be the first in the region to do so.